What would you do if your husband called you not particularly bright in front of 300 people, six news cameras, and the most powerful names in Boston? While you were 8 months pregnant with his child, he told the crowd she was like a golden retriever, loyal but not smart. His colleague laughed and said, "Some women are just meant to support great men from behind the scenes." 300 people laughed with them. He told her to sit down. He said, "The grown-ups are talking." But she didn't sit down. Not this time. Because what nobody in that room knew, not her husband, not his mistress, not a single person holding a champagne glass, was that the quiet, pregnant woman they were laughing at owned the entire law firm where her husband worked. She managed $750 million in secret. She spoke 4 languages. She graduated top of her class from Cambridge. And her father? A British duke who had just landed in Boston with a full royal security detail and every document needed to end her husband's career in under 10 minutes. She didn't whisper. She took the microphone right out of his hand. This story is a reminder that your worth never decreases just because someone fails to recognize it. And real love doesn't silence you. It asks you who you are and actually listens to the answer. If you believe karma always keeps receipts, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story like this. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And if this one gave you chills, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The Governor's Gala at the Boston Public Library was the kind of event where power dressed itself in silk and pretended to be humble. 300 of Boston's most influential people filled the McKim Building's Grand Hall, their laughter bouncing off marble columns and crystal chandeliers that had witnessed a century of carefully curated self-congratulation. Haley Crawford stood on the stage, and she was trying very hard not to shake. She was 8 months pregnant. The gray dress Max had picked out for her washed the color from her skin and hung from her shoulders like an apology. It was the kind of dress designed to make a woman disappear, and that was exactly what Max wanted. He wanted her present, but invisible, decorative, but silent, a prop in the background of his moment. Max Sutherland gripped the microphone with the easy confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether he belonged in the spotlight. At 35, he was the youngest senior associate at Hale and Whitmore Legal Partners, and tonight he was receiving the Corporate Citizenship Award for the Henderson merger, a deal that had saved 3,000 jobs and restructured $200 million in corporate debt. It was, by every measure, the crowning achievement of his career. He did not know that his wife had designed the strategy. He did not know that his wife had saved the deal when it nearly collapsed 6 weeks ago. He did not know that his wife owned the entire law firm where he worked. He did not know any of this because in 3 years of marriage, he had never once asked his wife a meaningful question about herself. Max smiled at the crowd, that smile, the one that crinkled the corners of his blue eyes and made him look like a man you could trust with your future. Haley had fallen in love with that smile 4 years ago. She had not yet learned that it was a mask. "And I have to thank my beautiful wife, Haley," Max said, scanning the crowd until he found her standing slightly behind him, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "Come up here, sweetheart." Every head turned. 300 pairs of eyes landed on the pregnant woman in the gray dress, and Haley felt each gaze like a pin pressing into her skin. She stepped forward because that was what Max expected. She had learned over 3 years that the fastest way through his performances was to play her part and wait for them to end. Max pulled her close. His grip on her waist was firm, proprietary, the way someone might hold a briefcase They did not want to set down. "Is she not sweet?" Max said to the crowd. "My little home buddy. She is like a golden retriever. Very loyal. Not particularly bright, but loyal." The room erupted in laughter. 300 people, laughing at a pregnant woman standing on a stage in a dress that made her look like a ghost. Vanessa Lockhart materialized at the microphone's edge. Vanessa was Max's colleague, 32 years old, stunning in emerald silk that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her timing was, as always, surgical. "Well, we cannot all be rocket scientists," Vanessa said, her voice carrying the bright, sharp tone of a woman who had practiced cruelty until it sounded like wit. "Some women are just meant to support great men from behind the scenes." More laughter. Louder now. The kind of laughter that feeds on itself, that grows because people are looking at each other and deciding this is acceptable, because everyone else is laughing too. Max patted Haley's shoulder. The gesture was casual, dismissive, the way you might pat a dog that had performed a trick adequately, but not impressively. "You can go sit down now, honey. The grown-ups are talking." The words hit Haley like a physical blow, not because they were new. Max had said worse in private, behind the closed doors of their Back Bay penthouse, where no one could witness the small, methodical cruelties that defined their marriage. But he had never said it here, never in front of 300 witnesses, never with 6 news cameras recording every word, never while she was 8 months pregnant with his child. Her hand tightened on her belly. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting on her behalf. Haley turned to leave the stage. Her face was burning. Her eyes were dry because she had learned a long time ago that tears in public gave Max ammunition for days afterward. She could feel the weight of 300 stares pressing against her back as she took the first step toward the stairs. And that was when the doors at the back of the hall burst open. What happens when the man who mocked his pregnant wife in front of 300 people discovers she is royalty? What happens when the woman he called not particularly bright turns out to be the most powerful person in the room? To understand how Haley Crawford ended up on that stage, we need to go back, 3 years back, to a charity auction in Boston where a quiet young woman from Maine met a charming attorney who would spend the next 3 years trying to break her without ever realizing she was unbreakable. But before we go back, drop a comment telling us where you are watching from. And if you love stories about karma and justice, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will leave you absolutely speechless. Haley Victoria Weston Clark was born in a private wing of a London hospital on a rainy Tuesday in March, 28 years before she would stand on that stage in Boston. Her mother, Catherine Crawford, held her for the first time while her father, Lord Edward Weston Clark, Duke of Ashbourne, stood at the window and watched the rain streak down the glass with an expression that was equal parts joy and dread. Edward was a duke from a lesser-known branch of the House of Windsor, not a headline-grabbing royal, not the kind whose face appeared on tea towels and commemorative plates, but a man of genuine aristocratic lineage, who held a seat in the House of Lords and served as the Crown's special envoy for international economic affairs. His family's wealth was old, deep, and carefully managed. Their influence extended through diplomatic circles, international finance, and the quiet corridors of power where decisions were made by people whose names the public would never know. When Haley was 3 years old, everything changed. A political scandal, orchestrated by rivals who wanted Edward's diplomatic post, erupted with the kind of ferocity that only British politics can produce. Accusations were fabricated. Documents were forged. The tabloids, always hungry for aristocratic blood, ran stories that painted Edward as corrupt, incompetent, a disgrace to his title. The accusations were false. Edward fought them. He won eventually, in the quiet way that truth sometimes wins when it has enough money and patience behind it. But during the worst of it, something else happened. Something the public never learned about. Death threats. Real ones. Not the vague, angry letters that public figures receive and file away. Specific, detailed, credible threats against Edward's family, against Catherine, against 3-year-old Haley. Edward made the hardest decision of his life. He sent them away. Catherine took Haley to America under her maiden name, Crawford. They settled in a small coastal town in Maine, the kind of place where people minded their own business and a woman raising a daughter alone did not attract particular attention. Catherine told the neighbors she was a widow. She told Haley the truth. "Your father is a duke," Catherine would say during their evening walks along the rocky shore. "A real duke, with a title and a coat of arms and a very large house in the English countryside. And he loves you more than anything in the world. But there are people who would hurt us to hurt him. So we stay here, we stay quiet, and we stay safe." Haley grew up understanding two things that most children never have to reconcile. First, that she was extraordinary, the daughter of British nobility, heir to a fortune and a legacy that stretched back centuries. Second, that she could never, under any circumstances, let anyone know. She spoke to her father every week on encrypted phone lines. He arranged her education with meticulous care. When Haley showed exceptional academic ability, Edward enrolled her at Cambridge University under a sealed identity. She attended remotely for most of her coursework, flying to England for examinations under security escort, staying in safe houses arranged by her father's protection team. She graduated at 21 with a law degree. Magna cum laude, dual specialization in international law and economics. Her professors described her as brilliant, disciplined, and possessing a maturity far beyond her years. No one in America knew any of this. To her neighbors in Maine, Haley Crawford was a quiet, studious girl who kept to herself and spent a lot of time on her laptop. At 22, Edward entrusted Haley with the American holdings of the Weston Clark Family Trust. The portfolio was worth $750 million, spanning renewable energy, biotech, real estate, and impact investing. Haley managed it under the name HV. Weston, conducting business through encrypted channels, video calls routed through servers in 3 countries, and a network of attorneys and financial advisors who knew her only as a voice on a phone and a signature on contracts. She spoke 4 languages fluently: English, French, German, and Spanish. She could negotiate a corporate restructuring in German before lunch and review environmental impact studies in Spanish before dinner. Men twice her age deferred to her judgment. Board members of multinational corporations awaited her decisions with nervous anticipation, and then her mother died. Cancer, quick and cruel and utterly indifferent to the fact that Catherine Crawford had spent 25 years sacrificing everything to keep her daughter safe. One day, Catherine was tending her garden, and 6 months later, Haley was standing alone at a graveside in Maine, watching them lower the only person who had ever known both halves of her into the frozen earth. For the first time in her life, Haley was truly alone in America. She was 24 years old, managing $750 million in assets, carrying the weight of a secret identity that isolated her from every human connection, and grieving a mother whose sacrifice she was only beginning to fully understand. Her father begged her to come home. "Come back to England," he said. The threats have diminished. It has been 20 years. You can have a life here, a real life, with your real name in your real home. But Haley had built something in America. A quiet life, yes. An invisible life. But it was hers, and she was not ready to give it up. Not yet, she told her father. Give me a little more time. 2 years after her mother's death, Haley volunteered at a charity auction benefiting Boston Medical Center. She was 26, working the registration table, wearing a simple black dress and a name tag that said Haley C. She had been living in Boston for 8 months, ostensibly taking a few classes at Boston University, building the kind of ordinary life that a woman with no visible past could reasonably construct. That was where she met Max Sutherland. He noticed her immediately. Haley had the kind of beauty that did not announce itself from across the room, but revealed itself gradually. The kind that made you look twice, and then a third time. The kind that got more interesting the longer you studied it. Dark hair, green eyes, a stillness about her that could be mistaken for shyness, but was actually the practiced composure of someone who had spent a lifetime being careful. Max pursued her with the focused intensity of a man who always got what he wanted. Flowers delivered to her apartment, dinners at restaurants where the waitstaff knew him by name, weekend trips to Cape Cod, where he rented a cottage overlooking the ocean, and talked for hours about his cases, his ambitions, his trajectory toward becoming the youngest senior partner in the history of Hale and Whitmore legal partners. He talked about himself constantly. He never asked about her family. He never asked about her education. He never asked what she wanted from life. He never asked. On their fourth date, after a firm dinner, where Haley had spent 3 hours sitting quietly at a table full of attorneys who spoke to her with the careful, slow politeness people reserve for someone they assume cannot follow the conversation, Max drove her home and said something that should have ended everything. You were perfect tonight, quiet, pretty, did not try to dominate the conversation. That is exactly what I need in a wife. Any other woman might have heard the warning in those words, might have recognized the blueprint Max was drawing, a marriage where she would be ornamental, silent, and small, might have ended things that night and never looked back. But Haley heard something else. She heard a man who wanted her, not Lady Haley Victoria Weston Clark, daughter of a duke, manager of $750 million, Cambridge-educated attorney, who spoke 4 languages, just Haley. Plain, quiet, nobody special Haley from a small town in Maine. After a lifetime of wondering whether anyone could ever love her for herself, stripped of title and wealth and name, here was a man who seemed to want exactly that. She was not running an experiment. She was not testing him. She was falling in love with the wrong person, and she did not know it yet. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. Haley's father did not attend. It was too dangerous, too exposed, too many cameras, and too many questions about the bride's family. Edward watched a live feed from London, alone in his study, and cried for the second time in his adult life. The first had been the day he sent Haley away. Haley planned to tell Max the truth eventually, after they had built a foundation, after he had proven that the love she believed she saw in him was real, after she felt safe enough to let someone in. But the foundation never came. From the first month of their marriage, Max showed her exactly who he was. And by the time Haley understood, leaving was not simple. A messy divorce would generate public records. Public records could be traced. Traced records could reach the people her father had spent 25 years hiding her from. The enemies had faded, but they had not disappeared. Edward still monitored them. The risk was diminished, but not eliminated. Haley was trapped, not by weakness, not by passivity, not by the simple-minded helplessness Max assumed defined her. She was trapped by the very secret that made her powerful. The identity that could have freed her was the same identity that kept her caged, and so she stayed. She folded his shirts. She cooked his dinners. She endured his lectures about her appearance, her intelligence, her value. She sat at firm dinners and let strangers laugh at her while she managed $750 million from a laptop hidden in the room Max called her little craft room. She stayed because leaving safely required time and planning and the right moment. She did not know that the right moment would find her on a stage, 8 months pregnant, while her husband told 300 people she was not particularly bright. But the right moment was coming, and when it arrived, it would be devastating. The penthouse in Back Bay sat on the 32nd floor of a glass tower overlooking the Charles River. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble countertops, a living room that could comfortably host 40 people, and a master bathroom with heated floors that Max considered one of his finest achievements. He did not know that the building was owned by the Weston Clark Family Trust. He did not know that the loan securing the penthouse was guaranteed by assets his wife controlled through 7 layers of shell corporations. He did not know any of this because the architecture of Haley's hidden life was so precisely constructed that even forensic accountants would have needed months to trace the connections. Max knew one thing about his home. It was his, just like everything else. Every morning followed the same script. Max's alarm rang at 6:15. He showered for exactly 12 minutes. He emerged wrapped in a towel and inspected the shirt Haley had laid out for him, checking for wrinkles, with the meticulous displeasure of a man who needed something to criticize before breakfast. "You wrinkled my blue Oxford yesterday," Max called from the bathroom one Tuesday morning, 3 months into Haley's pregnancy. "Do you understand how embarrassing it is when a senior partner shows up to court looking like his wife cannot handle basic laundry?" Haley said nothing. She had discovered early in their marriage that silence shortened these lectures. Engagement extended them. If she apologized, Max would spend 10 minutes explaining exactly how her apology was insufficient. If she defended herself, he would spend 20 minutes explaining why her defense proved his point. Silence, on the other hand, gave him nothing to push against. He would exhaust himself against her quiet the way a wave exhausts itself against a seawall, and then he would leave. Max emerged in a charcoal suit that cost more than most people earned in a month. He examined Haley's jeans and sweater the way someone might examine a stain on an otherwise acceptable carpet. "You look homeless. At least put on something decent." "What if someone from the firm sees you?" He grabbed his briefcase and headed for the door. "Pick up my dry cleaning. The ticket is on the counter. And do not forget, like last time." The door closed behind him. Haley waited until she heard the elevator descend. Then she waited 30 seconds more because Max occasionally forgot something and came back. And being caught on her encrypted laptop would raise questions she could not answer. When she was certain he was gone, Haley Crawford disappeared. In her place stood H.V. Weston. She retrieved the laptop from a hidden compartment in the room Max called her little craft room. It was a small study he never entered because he had deemed it beneath his interest. A space where Haley supposedly did scrapbooking and other activities Max categorized as adorable but pointless. The laptop was encrypted with military-grade security. Her video calls were routed through servers in 3 different countries. Her digital footprint was, by design, non-existent. In the next 60 minutes, Haley authorized $30 million in renewable energy investments across the American Southwest, restructured a corporate debt agreement that would save 2,000 jobs at a manufacturing plant in Michigan, declined an acquisition proposal that would have displaced low-income housing in Austin, and reviewed quarterly performance reports from 7 portfolio companies spanning biotech, real estate, and clean technology. Her phone rang, a number from London. She answered in French because the first contingent on the call was from Paris. Yes, this is H.V. Weston. For 20 minutes she spoke in rapid, precise French about the terms of a joint venture with a European pharmaceutical company. Then the Frankfurt representatives joined, and she switched to German without pause, her accent flawless, her vocabulary technical and specific. She asked pointed questions about regulatory compliance. She challenged their revenue projections. She demanded revised environmental impact assessments before she would approve the next funding tranche. Men twice her age said yes, ma'am, and scrambled to meet her requirements. When the call ended, she deleted it from her phone's history, just like she deleted all the others. Then she closed the laptop, hid it back in its compartment, changed into clothes Max would find acceptable, and went to pick up his dry cleaning. This was Haley's life. Two lives, actually, running parallel, never touching, like train tracks that stretched toward the same horizon, but could never meet. By day, she was Haley Crawford, Max's quiet wife, the woman who forgot the dry cleaning and burned the chicken and could not hold a conversation at firm dinners. By night, after Max fell asleep and his breathing settled into the heavy, oblivious rhythm of a man who never questioned what happened in the dark, she was H.V. Weston, managing $750 million, making decisions that affected thousands of lives, commanding respect from people who would have been astonished to learn that the voice on the phone belonged to a 28-year-old woman living in a penthouse in Boston with a husband who thought she was too simple to understand the word portfolio. But 3 months ago, something had changed, something that made the parallel tracks begin to bend toward each other. Haley was pregnant. She had discovered it on a Wednesday afternoon, alone in the bathroom, staring at two pink lines on a plastic stick that cost $11 at the pharmacy and carried the weight of everything she had been afraid to hope for. A baby, their baby. For one luminous, irrational moment, Haley believed this would change everything. Surely the knowledge that he was going to be a father would crack open something tender in Max. Surely this would be the thing that finally made him see her, really see her, as a person with value beyond her willingness to be quiet and small. She planned the announcement with the kind of care she usually reserved for multi-million-dollar transactions. She cooked Max's favorite dinner, chicken piccata with roasted potatoes, and a Caesar salad made from scratch. She set the table with the good china. She put candles on the table and poured his favorite wine, and set a glass of sparkling water at her own place. She rehearsed the words all day. She imagined his face lighting up. She imagined him pulling her close, putting his hand on her belly, saying something like, "We are going to be a family." Max came home 2 hours late. He was not alone. Vanessa Lockhart walked in behind him, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her perfume arriving before she did. They had been working on a case, Max explained without being asked, in the tone of a man who considered his wife's curiosity about his whereabouts to be an imposition. Haley served dinner for 3. She had not prepared enough chicken piccata for a guest, so she gave Vanessa her portion and made herself a sandwich in the kitchen while Max and Vanessa sat at the dining table with their heads close together, laughing at jokes Haley was not included in, discussing cases Haley was not supposed to understand. "This chicken is dry," Max said, not looking up from his papers. Vanessa smiled. It was the kind of smile that looked like sympathy, but functioned like a scalpel. "Do not apologize, Haley. Cooking is hard. Not everyone has the knack for it. I am sure you are doing your best." Haley told Max about the baby while she was clearing dishes. She said it simply, without the rehearsed speech, without the candles that had burned down to nothing, without the imagined embrace. She said it because she could not hold it in anymore, and because some part of her still believed that the words, "I am pregnant," carried enough weight to break through anything. Max put down his fork. His face did not light up. It tightened. The way a face tightens when someone hears news they were not prepared for and do not want. Are you serious? We did not plan this. This is terrible timing for my partnership track. Could you not have been more careful? He did not touch her belly. He did not ask how she felt. He did not say congratulations. He looked at her with the flat, irritated expression of a man who has just been told about an unexpected expense and is already calculating how to minimize the damage. Then he went back to the living room, to Vanessa, to their laughter and their private jokes and their shared world that had no room for Haley or the baby growing inside her. Haley stood in the kitchen, one hand on her barely showing belly, and whispered the first words she ever spoke to her child. "It is okay, little one. Mama is here. We are going to be okay." She did not know if she believed it, but she said it anyway, because that is what mothers do. They promise safety even when they cannot see it. They build shelter out of words when they have nothing else. Over the coming months, these whispered conversations would become Haley's only moments of honesty, the only time she could be herself in a house built on lies. Late at night, in the dark, with her hands on her growing belly, and her voice barely above a breath, she would tell her baby about London and Cambridge and a grandfather who was a duke. She would speak in French sometimes, or German, letting the languages she hid all day flow freely in the darkness. She would say, "I love you," in 4 languages, because she could not say it in any language to the man sleeping beside her. And the baby would kick, every time, as if answering, as if saying, "I hear you, Mama. I am here." Vanessa Lockhart understood power the way a surgeon understands anatomy. She knew where the joints were. She knew where to cut. And she knew that the most effective incisions were the ones the patient did not feel until they were already bleeding. She had been circling Max for 18 months, and Haley had watched every calculated move with the quiet, analytical attention of a woman who had spent her adult life evaluating threats to a $750 million portfolio. Vanessa was not a rival wife or a romantic competitor. Vanessa was something far more dangerous. She was a weapon aimed at Max that happened to enjoy hurting Haley along the way. What Max saw when he looked at Vanessa was everything he wished his wife could be. Sharp where Haley was soft, ambitious where Haley was compliant, aggressive where Haley was meek. Vanessa challenged his ideas just enough to seem brilliant, but never enough to threaten his ego. She wore perfume he complimented and skirts he noticed. She laughed at his jokes with the precise calibration of a woman who understood that a man like Max needed to believe he was the most interesting person in every room. What Haley saw when she looked at Vanessa was a predator wearing designer clothes and a sympathetic smile. The attacks started small. At a firm cocktail party when Haley was 5 months pregnant, Vanessa approached with champagne and concern. "Haley, sweetheart, look at you, glowing. I love how you do not feel pressure to compete with all the designer labels here." That kind of confidence, just embracing being understated, is so rare. The other wives heard exactly what Vanessa meant. Understated meant cheap. Confidence meant too clueless to know the difference. Vanessa delivered insults the way a chocolatier wraps poison, and something so beautiful that you did not recognize the danger until it was already inside you. At the summer associate dinner, when Haley was 6 months pregnant, Vanessa cornered her in the bathroom. The conversation was staged with the precision of a theatrical production. Vanessa leaned against the marble counter, her expression dripping with manufactured concern. "Honey, I need to tell you something as a friend. People are talking. They say Max seems disconnected from you at events. I am worried about how it looks for his partnership. Have you thought about taking some classes? Learning a little about corporate law? Just enough to hold a basic conversation?" She touched Haley's shoulder gently, the way you touch a child you are about to disappoint. "Max is brilliant. He deserves a partner who can match his intellect. Not that you are not wonderful in your own way. In your own way." Three words that contained an entire philosophy of dismissal. You are fine for what you are, but what you are is not enough. At a partner dinner, when Haley was 7 months pregnant, Vanessa went further. She positioned herself near Max's mentor, Gerald Richmond, at the far end of the table. Her voice was low but perfectly calibrated to carry to where Haley sat, ignored and alone, at the opposite end. Max is wasted in his current situation. A wife should be an asset at these events, not someone he has to apologize for. Look at the Hendersons. Lauren Henderson closes deals at every dinner because she understands the business. That is what a man at Max's level needs. The message was clear. Haley was not that partner, but Vanessa could be. But Vanessa's game was not what anyone thought it was. She did not want Max. She did not love him. She did not even particularly like him. Max Sutherland was, in Vanessa's calculation, a useful vehicle, a man with good cases, good clients, and the kind of blind arrogance that made him easy to manipulate. She had been systematically mining his career for its most valuable components and selling them to the highest bidder. Haley's security network, the same team of investigators and analysts who monitored threats to the Weston Clark Trust's American holdings, had uncovered Vanessa's betrayal 6 weeks ago. The evidence was comprehensive, documented, and devastating. Vanessa had contacted Kellerman and Price, a rival law firm, 13 times in the past 2 months. She had copied confidential files from 17 of Max's active cases. She had leaked privileged strategy information to opposing counsel on at least 4 occasions. She had nearly destroyed the Henderson merger, Max's crowning achievement, by feeding his negotiation terms to the other side in exchange for a promised senior partnership at the rival firm. The Henderson deal had survived only because Haley had intervened. Working through her encrypted channels, making calls in French and German to contacts that Vanessa could not identify or reach, Haley had rerouted the negotiation through alternative pathways and salvaged the deal from collapse. Max was being honored tonight for work his wife had saved, using a strategy his wife had designed, at a firm his wife owned. And the woman he admired most in the world was the one trying to destroy him. The irony was almost elegant in its cruelty. The night before the gala, Haley came home early from what Max believed was a grocery trip. She paused in the hallway, out of sight, when she heard voices from the living room. Max and Vanessa, sitting close, a bottle of wine between them, the kind of intimacy that did not need to be physical to be a betrayal. "So tomorrow is your big night," Vanessa was saying. "Are you bringing Haley?" Max sighed, the sigh of a man discussing an obligation rather than a partner. "I have to. It would look strange not to. But honestly, she is going to stand there like a decoration. She will not understand half of what is being discussed." "Why did you marry her?" The question was bold, intimate, the kind of question that crosses a line between colleague and something else. Max's answer came quickly, as if he had thought about it many times. "Because she was manageable. My first girlfriend was ambitious, always competing with me. My second was too social, always wanted attention. Haley does not compete. She does not demand. She does not complicate my life. She just exists in the background." Vanessa laughed, a delighted musical sound. "That is the saddest thing I have ever heard. Marriage as a convenience. It works for me," Max said. "Though, I will admit, Having someone like you around has made me wonder what I am missing. Haley stood in the hallway, 8 months pregnant, listening to her husband describe their marriage the way someone might describe a lease on a reliable but unexciting car. Manageable, background, convenient. She did not cry. She had used up her tears months ago on smaller wounds that had prepared her for this larger one. Instead, she felt something cold and precise settle into the center of her chest, like a key sliding into a lock. She left the penthouse without being heard. She walked for 2 hours through the November streets of Boston, while her phone buzzed with messages from her security team asking where she had gone. The baby kicked with unusual insistence, as if trying to remind her that she was not alone, that there was someone inside her who needed her to be strong. When she returned, Vanessa was gone. Max was asleep on the couch, the empty wine bottle on the coffee table, his mouth slightly open, his face bound and unguarded, and completely unaware that the woman he called manageable was standing above him, deciding his fate. She looked at him for a long moment. This man she had loved, this man she had hidden herself for, this man who had married her because she was quiet and stayed because she was convenient, and was now contemplating replacing her because someone louder and shinier had caught his attention. Tomorrow night, at the gala, everything would begin to end. She whispered to her belly in the dark, "One more day, little one, just one more day. If you have ever loved someone who did not deserve it, then you already know the feeling that Haley carried with her every hour of every day. It is not the sharp, clean pain of heartbreak. It is something duller and heavier, like wearing a coat made of stones. You cannot take it off, because taking it off means admitting that you chose it, that you put it on, that you walked into this knowingly because you believed love was strong enough to change the weather. Haley believed that once. She does not anymore." The firm dinner celebrating the Henderson merger took place 2 weeks before the gala. 50 senior partners, their spouses, and key clients gathered in a private dining room at the Four Seasons. Haley attended in a navy dress Max had approved. She was 7 months pregnant and exhausted, and carrying the weight of her double life like a second pregnancy that no one could see. Max introduced her to the table with the casual diminishment she had come to expect. "This is Haley. She keeps things running at home so I can focus on what actually matters." A partner's wife, a kind woman named Rebecca, with warm eyes and an honest smile, tried to include Haley in the conversation. "What did you study, Haley? Before you met Max?" Before Haley could answer, Max laughed. "Oh, she dabbled in community college for a bit. Did not quite stick. But she makes incredible pot roast, so I think I came out ahead." The table laughed. Not all of them wanted to. Rebecca looked uncomfortable. But laughter is social currency, and in a room full of people whose careers depended on Max's goodwill, most of them paid the price. Vanessa delivered the final blow with practiced precision. "Max, you are so modest about your home life. Not every man has someone willing to just exist quietly in the background. It takes a special kind of woman to know her place. That is actually very selfless of you, Haley." To know her place. Haley sat through the rest of the dinner with one hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick against her palm in a steady rhythm that might have been comfort or might have been protest. She did not cry. She did not leave. She sat and smiled and played the part she had been playing for 3 years because leaving in the middle of the dinner would cause a scene, and scenes created questions, and questions could lead to answers she was not ready to give. That night, after they returned to the penthouse, Haley lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Max talked on the phone in the next room. His voice carried through the wall with the careless volume of a man who assumed his wife was too dull to understand or too passive to care. I do not know why I married her, honestly. She is just so manageable, like having a houseplant that does laundry. But with the baby coming, I am stuck for a while, at least until the partnership goes through. A pause. Vanessa's voice on the other end, too quiet to hear. Then Max laughed. Yeah, you are right. I deserve better. Haley rolled onto her side, both arms wrapped around her belly. The baby was still, as if listening. I am going to get us out of this, she whispered. I just need a little more time. Can you give Mama a little more time? The baby kicked once, hard and certain, like a promise. Haley reached for her encrypted phone on the nightstand. She typed a message to her father. Things are getting worse. I may need to move up the timeline. Her father's response came within seconds. It was 3 in the morning in London, but Lord Edward Weston Clark had not slept well since the day he sent his daughter to America 25 years ago. Say the word, and I am on the next plane. I have waited 3 years, Haley. My patience is gone. Only my love for you keeps me here. 2 more months, Haley typed. After the baby comes, I will be safer then. 2 months, not a day more. And if anything happens to you or my grandchild, I will burn his world to ashes. Haley put the phone down and closed her eyes. 2 more months. She could survive 2 more months. She did not know that in less than 2 weeks, every plan she had made would be shattered. 3 days after the firm dinner, Haley found an unexpected ally. Charles Finnegan had been managing partner of Hale and Whitmore for 20 years. He was 63 years old, principled in the quiet way that does not announce itself, and possessed of the kind of observational intelligence that came from decades of watching ambitious people reveal themselves. He had noticed things about Haley that no one else bothered to see. He found her on the balcony overlooking Copley Square during a firm cocktail event. She was standing alone, gripping the stone railing, letting the November wind clear her head. Escaping the congratulations, Charles asked, stepping outside, with the careful movements of a man who had earned every year on his body. Haley gave him a tired smile. Your husband is quite pleased with himself tonight. The Henderson merger was impressive work, very sophisticated financial architecture. Charles paused. His eyes were steady and thoughtful. I found it interesting that the strategy mirrors a framework presented at the London International Finance Summit 5 years ago, written by someone named H.V. Weston. Haley's heart rate spiked, but her face remained perfectly still. Years of practice. That sounds impressive, she said carefully. What is more impressive is that 3 years ago, when our firm was drowning in $40 million of debt, an anonymous donor restructured everything, saved us. The donor's representative conducted all negotiations in French. Charles looked at her directly. His expression held no threat, only curiosity and something that looked like respect. Max does not speak French. But I have heard you on the phone, Haley, when you thought no one was listening. Their eyes met, a long charged silence in which Haley calculated every possible outcome of the next 30 seconds. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because I have watched that man treat you like furniture for 3 years while you carry his child, and I do not believe you are what he says you are, not even close. Charles straightened his jacket against the wind. Let me help. I can call an emergency partner meeting. If the board knew who really owns this firm, everything changes. For one electric moment, Haley saw a path through the darkness. Charles was powerful, connected, trusted by the other partners. If he could bring the truth to light in a controlled way, she could avoid the messy, dangerous explosion she feared. Give me a week, she said. Let me think about how to do this safely. Charles nodded. He started to walk back inside, then stopped. I hope you get what you deserve, Haley, whatever that turns out to be. He did not know that within 48 hours, his attempt to help her would destroy his career. Vanessa Lockhart had been monitoring internal firm communications as part of her espionage operation. She did not know what Charles was planning, but she noticed the pattern. Encrypted emails to outside counsel, meetings not logged in the firm calendar, phone calls made from the balcony where he thought no one was watching. She went to Max with manufactured alarm. Charles is up to something. He has been communicating with outside legal teams. I think he is building a case to restructure the partnership. Maybe push you out. Max, who operated on a simple emotional equation where any threat to his status required immediate and overwhelming response, went to the senior partners within 24 hours. He presented Charles's behavior as evidence of cognitive decline, erratic communication patterns, secretive meetings, behavior unbefitting a managing partner of his age. The other partners, faced with a choice between backing Max, who was young, aggressive, and responsible for their biggest recent deal, and defending Charles, who was 63 and whose caution they had increasingly interpreted as slowness, made the calculation that ambitious people always make. They chose the future over the past. Charles Finnegan was placed on forced administrative leave. His access cards were deactivated. His office was cleared. 20 years of building and protecting the firm dismissed in an afternoon. Haley watched from the lobby as security escorted Charles to the elevator. He walked with dignity, his back straight, his expression composed. At the elevator doors, he caught Haley's eye. The look lasted only a moment, but it carried everything. I tried. I am sorry. Be careful. The doors closed. Charles was gone. And Haley's only ally was gone with him. That night she sat in her craft room in the dark, her laptop closed on her lap, and cried for the first time in months, not for herself, not even for the baby, for Charles, who had tried to do the right thing and been punished for it by the very system he had spent 2 decades serving. She whispered to her belly through the tears, "We are okay. Mama is figuring this out. We are okay." The baby kicked. Neither of them believed it. 3 days after Charles's removal, Haley's body did what her spirit had been trying not to do. It broke. She was in the kitchen making breakfast, a task she performed on autopilot, while her mind ran through contingency plans and legal scenarios and encrypted phone calls she needed to make. The room tilted, her vision blurred at the edges, darkening like someone was slowly closing a curtain around her field of view. Pain, sharp and deep and wrong, shot through her abdomen. She grabbed the counter. A glass fell and shattered on the marble floor. She looked down at the broken pieces and the water spreading across the white stone and thought, with the strange clarity that comes in moments of crisis, that it looked like a map of somewhere she did not want to go. She called 911. Her voice was steady, because steadiness was a reflex she had been practicing for 25 years. Max was at the office. She did not try to call him first. Some part of her already knew he would not come. At Massachusetts General Hospital, Dr. Sarah Brennan examined Haley with the focused urgency of a physician who was seeing exactly what she had feared. "Haley, you are showing signs of severe preeclampsia. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. If we cannot stabilize you in the next 24 hours, we may need to deliver early. At 32 weeks, your baby would face serious complications. Underdeveloped lungs, potential brain hemorrhage, weeks in the NICU, with no guarantee of avoiding long-term effects." Haley's hand moved to her belly with the instinctive protectiveness of every mother who has ever been told that the life inside her is in danger. "What do I need to do?" "Complete bed rest. Zero stress." Dr. Brennan paused, choosing her next words carefully. And honestly, Haley, you need support. This is not something you should be managing alone. Is your husband coming? Haley called Max. The phone rang 4 times and went to voicemail. She called again. Same result. She sent a text message. The words were simple because emergencies do not require eloquence. I am in the hospital. The baby is in danger. Please come. 45 minutes later, Max replied with a text that contained 11 words. In the middle of something important. I am sure the doctors have it handled. Try not to be dramatic. Try not to be dramatic. His wife was in a hospital bed, with monitors beeping, and an IV in her arm, and their baby's life hanging in the balance of her blood pressure readings, and Max Sutherland's response was, try not to be dramatic. He did not come that night. He did not come the next morning. He did not come at all. The hospital room was small and beige and smelled like antiseptic and institutional coffee. The fluorescent lights hummed a constant low note that burrowed into Haley's consciousness and stayed there. Through the thin wall, she could hear a woman in the next room laughing with her husband. They were discussing baby names. The husband favored something traditional. The wife wanted something unique. They went back and forth, laughing, disagreeing, compromising, doing all the ordinary things that couples do when they are building a life together instead of watching one fall apart. Haley put both hands on her belly. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. The IV dripped. Outside, Boston went about its business with complete indifference to the woman lying alone on the 3rd floor of a hospital that bore the name of a state she had never belonged to. She talked to her baby, the way she did every night, the only conversation in which she was permitted to be completely herself. Hey, little one, it is Mama. Listen, things are a little scary right now, but I need you to stay put, okay? Stay right where you are. Cook a little longer. I know it is not the nicest kitchen, but I need you to be strong for me. Tears slid from the corners of her eyes into her hair. She did not wipe them away because her hands were occupied, holding the belly that held everything she had left. Your grandfather is a duke. Did I ever tell you that? A real one, with a title and everything. He is in London right now, probably pacing a hole in his very expensive carpet because he is worried about us. He is going to love you so much. He is going to spoil you absolutely rotten. A shaky breath. The monitors beeped. The fluorescent lights hummed. And your mama is not what your daddy thinks she is. I am not simple. I am not stupid. I have been hiding, baby. Hiding who I am because I thought love was more important than truth. But I am starting to think I was wrong. The baby kicked. Hard. Insistent. The kind of kick that moves the surface of the belly visibly, that makes nurses smile and say, "Oh, that is a strong one. Okay, okay, I hear you. Mama hears you." Her encrypted phone buzzed on the nightstand. Her father. It was 4 in the morning in London. My security team tells me you are in hospital. Tell me what is happening, now. Edward's voice carried the controlled urgency of a man who has spent 3 years restraining himself and has just discovered that the thing he feared most has come to pass. Preeclampsia, Haley said. They are monitoring me. The baby, she could not finish the sentence. I am coming. Right now. Tonight, Papa, please, if you show up at a Boston hospital with a royal security detail, everything I have built here, everything you have built, is killing you. Silence. Haley had never heard her father raise his voice. In 25 years of phone calls, through every crisis and disappointment and lonely night, Edward Weston Clark had maintained the steady, measured tone of a man who believed that control was the highest form of love. Hearing him shout was like hearing thunder from a sky she had always known as blue. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. But the iron underneath it had not bent. Haley, my darling girl, you are lying in a hospital bed, alone, 8 months pregnant. Your husband will not even answer the phone. How much more are you willing to sacrifice for a man who does not deserve to speak your name? The question hung in the silence between London and Boston, crossing an ocean's 25 years of hiding and the uncountable small distances that accumulate when a father and daughter love each other across a gap they did not choose. Haley took a long, slow breath. The governor's gala is in 2 weeks. He is receiving an award for work I did, 300 witnesses, 6 news crews. If I am going to end this, I want it to be there, where everyone can see. 2 weeks, Edward said. 2 weeks, and then I am coming home. Then I will be at that gala. And God help the man who made my daughter cry in a hospital alone. They said good night. Or good morning, in Edward's case. Haley held the phone against her chest for a long time after the call ended, feeling the warmth of the screen fade the way warmth always fades, gradually and then completely. She was stabilized after 3 days. Dr. Brennan released her with strict orders for bed rest, reduced stress, and regular monitoring. Reduced stress. As if stress were a faucet you could simply turn off rather than the water you were drowning in. When Haley returned to the penthouse, it was empty. Max was at the office. The kitchen was clean because no one had used it. The living room was exactly as she had left it 3 days ago, as if her absence had not registered on the surface of the home they supposedly shared. On the bedroom nightstand, she found a pearl drop earring. Expensive, delicate, not hers. She picked it up and studied it. She knew it was Vanessa's. She knew it had been left deliberately, placed where Haley would find it, a territorial marker, as old and primal as a wolf marking the boundaries of its claim. Haley set the earring back down exactly where she had found it. She did not react. She did not cry. She made a mental note to add it to the documentation her security team was compiling, and she whispered to her belly, with the calm, steady voice of a woman who has finally stopped hoping for rescue and started planning war. 12 more days. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Haley would attend the governor's gala. Max would, as he inevitably did at every public event, belittle her in front of witnesses. The prenuptial agreement's morals clause, buried in paragraph 12 of page 47, would activate. Her father would arrive with documentation confirming her identity. Asset transfers would execute. She would walk out free. She spent 8 days preparing. Through her encrypted network, she coordinated with her father's legal team in London and her own attorneys in Boston. Eleanor Blackwell, the most feared divorce attorney in Massachusetts, was retained to prepare emergency custody filings. Every document was ready. Every contingency was covered. Every exit was mapped. For the first time in 3 years, Haley felt the ground firm beneath her feet. She allowed herself, for one careful moment, to imagine freedom. She imagined her daughter being born in England, in the estate where Haley should have grown up, surrounded by gardens and history and a grandfather who would love her with the fierce protective devotion of a man who had lost one chance at fatherhood and would not waste a second. Then Vanessa destroyed it. Vanessa's espionage operation required her to monitor firm communications obsessively. She tracked email patterns, calendar entries, phone logs, anything that might signal a threat to her operation or an opportunity to exploit. She was, in her own terrible way, as meticulous as Haley. And she noticed something that did not fit the pattern. Haley Crawford, the quiet housewife with no apparent connections or resources, had appeared in the appointment log of Eleanor Blackwell's office. Eleanor Blackwell, whose name was known to every attorney in Boston the way a general's name is known to every soldier in an army. Eleanor Blackwell, who had won custody cases against senators and corporate executives, and once, memorably, against a sitting governor. Eleanor Blackwell, who did not take clients who could not afford her, which meant that Haley Crawford, who supposedly had nothing, somehow had enough to hire the most expensive divorce attorney in New England. Vanessa called Max immediately. "Your sweet little housewife just hired Eleanor Blackwell." The Eleanor Blackwell. "She is planning something, Max. She's preparing to divorce you, and she has brought in the nuclear option." Max went cold, then hot, then cold again, cycling through the emotional temperatures of a man who has just realized that the furniture might be rearranging itself. He called his own attorney that night. His instructions were immediate and absolute. "I want to file first, tomorrow, and I want full custody." His attorney hesitated. "Max, she is 8 months pregnant. A custody filing at this stage. She has no income, no degree, no career, no family in this country. I have a partnership, a reputation, and resources. On paper, she has nothing. File it now." The attorney filed it. Because attorneys file what their clients tell them to file, especially when those clients pay the kind of fees that Max Sutherland paid. And Haley's careful timeline, 8 days of meticulous preparation leading to a controlled revelation at the gala, shattered like a glass on a marble floor. The catastrophe came in 3 waves, each arriving before she had recovered from the last, each building on the destruction of the one before it until the cumulative weight was enough to crush anyone, let alone a woman who was 8 months pregnant and running out of room to breathe. The first blow landed on a Tuesday. Haley went to her doctor's appointment, routine monitoring for the preeclampsia that Dr. Brennan was tracking with increasing concern. The appointment took 90 minutes. When she returned to the penthouse building, the doorman would not meet her eyes. He was a young man named Kevin, who had always been kind to Haley, holding the door with a genuine smile, asking about the baby, treating her with the small courtesies that had sustained her on days when no one else offered any. "I am sorry, Mrs. Sutherland," Kevin said, his gaze fixed on the lobby floor. "Mr. Sutherland has changed the access codes. He asked me to tell you that your personal belongings are in storage unit 4B in the basement." Haley stood in the lobby. 8 months pregnant. November. The glass doors behind her letting in drafts of 40-degree air. Every time someone entered or exited, she was standing in a building she secretly owned. Through 7 layers of shell corporations and international trusts, and she could not get past the lobby. She called Max. He answered this time, which was somehow worse than when he did not. "You hired Eleanor Blackwell behind my back. Did you think I would not find out? You want a war, Haley? You have got one. My attorney will be in touch." The line went dead. Building security brought 2 suitcases up from the storage unit. Inside them were clothes Max had approved, shoes he had selected, the carefully curated wardrobe of a woman whose husband controlled what she wore. Nothing of real value, nothing of her own. Haley stood on the Back Bay sidewalk with 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. She had $750 million in assets that she could not access without revealing her identity. She had a father 3,000 miles away across an ocean. She had a baby due in 4 weeks, and she had no place to sleep tonight. She walked to Boston Common. She sat on a bench beneath a bare oak tree whose branches scratched the November sky like cracks in gray glass. She wrapped her coat around her belly and felt the baby move inside her, restless and insistent, as if sensing that something fundamental had shifted in the geography of their shared existence. "We are okay, baby. Mama has got us." "We are okay," her voice shook. For the first time since she began talking to her baby, she did not sound like she believed it. She found a hotel near Chinatown that accepted cash and did not ask questions. She paid from a personal emergency account separate from the trust, money she had set aside years ago for exactly this kind of crisis. The room was small and clean and anonymous, the kind of room where people stayed when they were between one life and another. The second blow landed 3 days later. Max's attorney filed for emergency divorce and emergency temporary custody of the unborn child. The filing was a masterpiece of selective truth and strategic omission. It described Haley Crawford Sutherland as a woman with no verifiable education, no employment history, no income, and no family support system in the United States. It cited erratic and secretive behavior, including unexplained absences and covert phone calls. It requested a psychological evaluation, claiming the respondent may be mentally unfit for the responsibilities of motherhood. Attached to the filing was a sworn statement from Vanessa Lockhart, who identified herself as a colleague of the petitioner and a frequent guest in the family home. Vanessa's statement described Haley as emotionally unstable, delusional, and exhibiting signs of mental deterioration that raised concerns about her ability to care for a newborn. If the court granted temporary custody, Max could take the baby from Haley's arms the moment it was born. Haley read the filing in a coffee shop 3 blocks from her hotel room. Her hands shook so badly that the pages rattled against each other like dry leaves in wind. The words blurred and sharpened and blurred again. No education, no resources, unfit mother. She put one hand on her belly. The baby was still, completely still, as if listening. "They want to take you from me," she called Eleanor Blackwell. The attorney's voice was calm and professional, which was somehow both reassuring and terrifying, because calm professionalism in a crisis means the crisis is real enough to require it. "How bad is this?" Haley asked. "Without proof of your actual identity and resources, a sympathetic judge could grant temporary custody to Max within 72 hours. He has income, a home, professional standing. On paper, Haley, you have nothing. I cannot reveal who I am yet. Not like this. It has to be. Haley, you may not have the luxury of choosing the moment anymore." The third blow was the one that finally cracked the shell. Vanessa moved into the penthouse. Officially, permanently. And she did not do it quietly. She posted a photograph on Instagram. The Back Bay penthouse living room, redecorated with Vanessa's things. Her coat draped over the chair where Haley used to sit in the evenings with her hands on her belly, talking to her baby. A bottle of expensive wine on the counter. Where Haley used to cook dinners that Max complained about. The caption read, "New chapter. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step into the life you deserve." The Boston legal community saw it within hours. Partners' wives shared it in group chats with comments that ranged from sympathetic to gleeful. Margaret Wells, wife of a state senator and queen bee of every social circle that mattered, screenshotted it and sent it to her friends with the message. Well, that did not take long. Within 2 days, the consensus was established. Max had traded up. Good for him. His pregnant wife, that quiet, dim girl, who never had anything interesting to say, had been set aside for someone sharper, someone more appropriate, someone who belonged in the rooms Max was trying to conquer. It was not even particularly scandalous. It was just the natural order asserting itself. Haley saw the Instagram post in her hotel room. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her phone screen for a long time. Vanessa's coat, on Haley's chair, in Haley's home, in the building Haley owned. Something shifted behind her eyes. It was not sadness. She had used up her sadness. It was not anger, not exactly. It was something colder and more precise than anger. It was the feeling of a woman who has finally reached the bottom of everything she is willing to lose and has discovered that the bottom is made of bedrock. She picked up her encrypted phone, called London. Her father answered before the first ring had finished. Papa, change of plans. I am not waiting for the gala. What do you need? I need you here in 4 days. I need a full security detail. I need every document. The trust papers, the firm ownership records, the prenuptial analysis. And I need the royal regalia. A pause. Edward's voice carried surprise, which was rare for a man who had spent 4 decades navigating diplomatic crises. The regalia? Haley, are you sure? He wanted to show Boston who he is. I am going to show Boston who I am. And I am not going to wait for him to hand me the microphone. I'm going to take it. I will be on a plane in 3 hours. Haley ended the call. She walked into the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. A pregnant woman in a cheap hotel room. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back, wearing clothes from a suitcase packed by a man who controlled what she wore. She addressed her reflection and her baby with absolute calm. No more hiding, no more being small. Tomorrow we start fighting. If you are ready for Haley to take back everything, stay right here, because the gala is next, and what happens there, nobody saw coming. Nobody. The Boston Public Library's McKim Building had been hosting the powerful and the self-important since 1895. Its Renaissance Revival architecture provided the perfect stage for people who believed their money and influence entitled them to Renaissance-level grandeur. The marble columns, the vaulted ceilings, the murals depicting scenes of classical virtue, all of it conspired to make everyone inside feel slightly more significant than they actually were. On the night of the governor's gala, 300 of Boston's most influential people filled the grand hall. Crystal chandeliers threw prismatic light across a sea of designer gowns and tailored suits. Champagne flowed from a fountain near the entrance. A string quartet played Vivaldi with the mechanical perfection of musicians who had performed at so many identical events that they could do it in their sleep. 6 news crews had set up cameras along the perimeter. The governor's gala was always good for footage, providing the kind of glittering background that made local news anchors look important by association. Max Sutherland arrived with Vanessa Lockhart on his arm. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo. She wore emerald silk. They walked in like a declaration. 2 beautiful people announcing their existence to a room that had been expecting exactly this. The Instagram post had done its work. Everyone knew. Everyone had opinions. And the dominant opinion, the one that circulated through the room in whispers and knowing glances, was that Max had made the right choice. Max worked the room with the practiced charm of a man who understood that power was, above all, a performance. He shook hands with the Attorney General. He laughed with the mayor's chief of staff. He accepted congratulations for the Henderson merger with the humble gratitude of someone who had rehearsed humility in front of a mirror. When someone asked about Haley, Max waved the question away with the casual dismissal of a man discarding an outdated accessory. We have gone our separate ways. Sometimes you outgrow people. She will be fine. She is a simple girl. Simple needs, Vanessa added, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Some women are happier in smaller lives. It is actually kinder to let them go. Margaret Wells and the partners' wives exchanged glances that confirmed what they already believed. Max had traded up. The quiet wife had been released into whatever modest life she was suited for. The natural order of things had been restored. The award ceremony began at 8:30. Max took the stage. The spotlight found him like it had been looking for him all night. He stood at the podium, the Corporate Citizenship Award gleaming on the lectern beside him, and launched into a speech that was equal parts gratitude and self-congratulation. He thanked his mentors. He thanked his team. He thanked his vision, which he described as if vision were something he had invented rather than something everyone possesses, but few bother to use. And then he saw her, Haley, standing at the back of the hall, 8 months pregnant, wearing the same gray dress, the one he had picked out, the one that made her disappear. She had come alone. She had walked past the security checkpoints with the quiet, unremarkable presence that 3 years of being invisible had perfected. No one had stopped her because no one had noticed her. She was, as Max had designed her to be, the kind of woman your eyes passed over without registering. Max could not resist. The arrogance was a reflex he had never learned to control, a muscle that flexed automatically whenever he saw an opportunity to demonstrate his superiority over someone who could not fight back. Oh, and it looks like my soon-to-be ex-wife decided to join us tonight. Let us give her a hand, folks. It takes real courage to show up when you have got, well, not much going on. Scattered laughter. Nervous, some of the older guests shifted uncomfortably. But most of them laughed because laughing with Max was easier than not laughing with Max. Vanessa materialized at the microphone's edge. Her timing, as always, was impeccable. We cannot all be rocket scientists, can we? Some women are just meant to support great men from behind the scenes. No shame in that. Max grinned at the crowd, then looked down at Haley with the kind of casual dismissal that only a man who has never been dismissed can truly achieve. You can go home now, honey. Oh, wait, you do not have one anymore, do you? Laughter. Louder now. Cruel. The sound of 300 people laughing at a pregnant woman who had been locked out of her home, served with custody papers, and replaced by the woman standing next to her husband on the stage above her. Haley stood motionless, her hands on her belly, her face absolutely unreadable. This time, she did not turn to leave. This time, she walked toward the stage. The crowd murmured as Haley moved through them. 8 months pregnant, in her forgettable gray dress, walking through a sea of silk and sequins, like a ghost gaining substance with every step. People parted for her, not out of respect, but out of the instinctive human response to someone moving with unexpected purpose. Max watched her approach with amused confusion. Haley, sweetheart, what are you? She climbed the 3 steps to the stage, slowly, because she was 8 months pregnant, and every step required effort and balance, and the kind of determination that does not announce itself, but simply proceeds. She made it to the top. She stood next to Max. She looked at the microphone in his hand, and she took it. Not grabbed, not snatched. She reached out and took it from his fingers with the quiet authority of someone who has been in control all along and has simply chosen this moment to let everyone know. Max was too stunned to resist. His fingers opened. The microphone left his hand. And for the first time in 3 years, Haley Crawford held the instrument that would amplify her voice to every corner of a room that had never heard her speak above a whisper. The room went silent. Absolutely, completely, breathlessly silent. 300 people holding champagne glasses and holding their breath and holding their assumptions about the quiet woman in the gray dress who had just done something none of them expected. When Haley spoke, her voice was different. The soft, uncertain tone she had used for 3 years, the voice that apologized before it spoke and retreated before it finished, was gone. In its place was something clear and educated and refined, carrying the subtle precision of someone trained in formal address since childhood. Every word was articulated with the care of a woman who understood that words properly deployed could demolish empires. Good evening. I know this is unexpected. I will be brief. Or, as brief as a woman my husband just publicly humiliated for the second time can manage. Nervous shifting in the audience. 300 people recalculating their assumptions in real time. Max reached for the microphone. Haley stepped back, one smooth step, out of his reach. The movement was small but devastating, the physical equivalent of a door closing. My name, my real name, is Lady Haley Victoria Weston Clark. For the past 3 years, I have been living in this city under my mother's maiden name. Most of you know me as Haley Crawford, Max's quiet wife, the one who did not quite finish community college, the one who makes, as my husband so memorably put it, a hell of a pot roast. She paused. Let the silence build. Let it grow heavy. Let every person in the room lean forward without realizing they were doing it. I would like to correct the record. I graduated from Cambridge University at 21 years old, magna cum laude, dual degrees in international law and economics. I did this under a sealed identity, for reasons I will explain in a moment. I speak 4 languages: English, French, German, and Spanish. I passed the bar examination in 3 jurisdictions before my husband passed it in 1. Somewhere in the crowd, a champagne glass slipped from someone's fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound was sharp and final, like a period at the end of a sentence that could not be unwritten. Max's face had gone white, the color drained from his skin so completely that he looked like a man standing in the wrong dream. That is not possible, he said. His voice cracked on the last syllable. Haley did not look at him. She looked at the crowd, 300 faces staring back at her, their expressions cycling through disbelief and confusion and the first tremors of understanding. At 22, I was entrusted with managing my family's American investment portfolio. Current value, $750 million. I have made decisions affecting international markets since before my husband made junior partner at a firm that, and this is the part I think you will find most interesting, I own. The room erupted. Whispers became exclamations. Exclamations became a rolling wave of sound that crashed against the marble walls and came back transformed into something raw and electric. 3 years ago, Hale and Whitmore faced $40 million in debt. Bankruptcy was inevitable. An anonymous donor purchased those debts, restructured the firm, and saved every career within these walls. That donor was the Weston Clark Family Trust, my trust, managed by me. She turned to look at Max directly. Her eyes met his, and what passed between them was not anger or triumph or satisfaction. It was the quiet finality of a woman who has seen everything she needed to see and has made her decision. You have been succeeding on my foundation, Max. Living in my building, drawing a salary from my firm, building your reputation on a framework I developed 5 years ago for the London International Finance Summit. And when the Henderson deal nearly collapsed 6 weeks ago because of sabotage, we will discuss in a moment, I saved it, through my connections, in languages you do not speak. Max gripped the podium. His knuckles were white. His award had fallen from the lectern at some point during the last 60 seconds and lay on the stage floor, gleaming uselessly. Why should anyone believe this? Haley smiled. For the first time all night, she smiled. It was not a smile of cruelty or revenge. It was the smile of a woman who has been carrying the heaviest secret in the room and is finally setting it down. I am glad you asked. She turned toward the doors at the back of the hall. Papa, I think it is time. The doors opened, not burst, opened, slowly, deliberately, with the ceremonial precision of someone who has entered 1,000 rooms and commanded silence in every one. 6 men in dark suits entered first. Their bearing was unmistakable, the disciplined, alert posture of professional protection officers trained in protocols that most people only saw in movies. They took positions along the walls with practiced efficiency, their eyes scanning the crowd with the dispassionate attention of men whose job was to ensure that nothing unexpected happened, except the thing they were there to ensure happened. Then Lord Edward Weston Clark walked through the doors. He was 64 years old, 6'2", silver-haired. He carried himself with the kind of authority that cannot be learned or purchased or pretended. It was the authority of generations, the accumulated weight of a family that had been holding power since before the nation hosting this gala had existed. He wore the formal regalia of British nobility, a midnight blue sash crossed diagonally across his chest bearing the Weston Clark family crest in gold. Medals from decades of diplomatic and humanitarian service glinted under the chandeliers. A signet ring on his right hand bore an insignia that anyone with knowledge of European aristocracy would recognize on sight. He walked directly toward the stage. Every step was measured. Every movement was deliberate. He was a man who had waited 3 years for this moment and intended to make every second of it count. The room was frozen. 300 people, watching a figure from a world they had only read about, walk through their gala with the calm, proprietary grace of a man who actually owned the room, not metaphorically, not socially, but literally, through 7 layers of shell corporations and his daughter's meticulous management. He stopped at the foot of the stage. His eyes found Haley. For one unguarded moment, his aristocratic mask cracked, and what showed through was not power or authority or diplomatic composure. It was love, a father's love for his daughter, raw and fierce and so large that it filled the space between them like heat. Then the mask returned, formal, aristocratic, lethal. Good evening. I am Lord Edward Weston Clark, Duke of Ashbourne. I serve as the Crown's special envoy for international economic affairs and hold a seat in the House of Lords. His English was the kind that Americans heard in period dramas and assumed was exaggerated. It was not. Every vowel was precisely shaped. Every consonant was delivered with the absolute confidence of a man who had never once questioned whether his voice deserved to be heard. My daughter has introduced herself. Allow me to confirm, everything she has told you is true, and there is more. He produced a leather portfolio bearing the Weston Clark family crest. Max had backed against the far side of the stage. His face was gray. His mouth was open. He looked like a man who had stepped off a curb and discovered that the street was actually a canyon. Edward looked up at Haley on the stage. His expression softened again, briefly, and he nodded once. But I believe my daughter was speaking. I am here to support her, not to speak for her. He held the portfolio up to her. The floor is yours, my darling. The crowd turned back to Haley. She stood at the podium, one hand on the microphone, one hand on her belly, and the shift in the room was tectonic. This was not a father rescuing his daughter. This was a daughter who had called in reinforcements. There is a difference, and every person in that room felt it. Haley took the portfolio from her father's outstretched hand. She opened it on the podium. Her movements were calm, practiced, the movements of a woman who had chaired boardrooms and reviewed billion-dollar contracts since her early 20s. Let me explain why I have been hiding. When I was 3 years old, my father's political enemies in London orchestrated a campaign to destroy our family. There were death threats, Real ones. My mother took me to America, changed our name, and raised me in hiding. For 25 years, my identity has been classified for my own protection. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice carried a vulnerability that made it stronger, not weaker. I married Max because I loved him. I want to be very clear about that. I did not marry him to test him. I did not marry him to prove a point. I married him because he was the first man who wanted me without knowing my title, and I thought that meant something. Her voice caught, just barely, then steadied. I was wrong. He did not want me. He wanted quiet. He wanted manageable. He wanted a woman who would not challenge him, question him, or outshine him. And for 3 years, that is what I gave him, because revealing who I really was could have put me and now my baby in danger. She held up the first document. But my husband has made revealing myself necessary, because 8 days ago, he locked me out of my home while I was at a doctor's appointment for pregnancy complications he never bothered to ask about. 5 days ago, he filed for emergency custody of our unborn child, claiming I am, and I am quoting, uneducated, unemployed, without resources, and potentially mentally unfit for motherhood. She read the words with devastating calm. The audience shifted. Several women pressed their hands to their mouths. So let me address each of those claims. She pulled documents from the portfolio one by one, laying them on the podium like cards in a game she had already won. Uneducated, Cambridge University, law degree, top of my class. Here's my diploma, my transcript, and a letter from the dean confirming my enrollment under sealed identity. Unemployed. I manage the Weston Clark Family Trust's American portfolio, $750 million in assets across renewable energy, biotech, and real estate. Here are my authorization documents, signed by the Trust's Board of Directors, without resources. I own this building we are standing in. I own the firm where my husband works. I own the Henderson merger he is being honored for tonight, because I designed the strategy and saved the deal when it was being sabotaged. She paused on the final claim. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the silent hall. Mentally unfit. My husband filed that claim based on sworn testimony from his colleague, Vanessa Lockhart, the same Vanessa Lockhart who is currently living in my penthouse, sleeping in my bed, and posting about it on Instagram. She looked at Vanessa, who had been edging toward the side exit with the careful sideways movement of a woman trying to disappear from a room that had suddenly become a courtroom. Miss Lockhart, please stay. We are not finished. The Royal Protection officers shifted. A barely perceptible movement, a slight squaring of shoulders, a subtle repositioning that blocked the exits with courteous, absolute immovability. They did not touch Vanessa. They did not need to. Their presence was a wall. My security team has spent 6 weeks documenting Miss Lockhart's activities. She has contacted rival firm Kellerman and Price 13 times in 2 months. She has copied confidential files from 17 of my husband's cases. She has provided opposing counsel with privileged strategy information on at least 4 occasions. The Henderson merger nearly collapsed because she leaked Max's terms to the other side. Haley's voice remained steady, factual, surgical, each sentence landing like a scalpel cut, precise and clean and impossible to undo. She was not helping Max reach his potential. She was systematically destroying his career while he was too flattered by her attention to notice. She did not want him. She wanted his client list. Corporate espionage, Miss Lockhart. The FBI's white-collar crime division will be receiving our complete file tomorrow morning. Vanessa's face was gray. Her mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. The emerald dress that had made her look powerful an hour ago now looked garish under the chandelier light, like a costume for a part she could no longer play. Max turned to look at Vanessa. For the first time, he saw her clearly. The admiration stripped away, the flattery exposed as strategy. The woman he had preferred over his wife revealed as the architect of his destruction. "You were working against me the whole time?" Vanessa said nothing. There was nothing to say. Haley turned back to Max. Her voice dropped, quieter now, but the room was so silent that a whisper would have carried. "And now, Max." The prenuptial agreement. She opened the document to a marked page. "Your lawyers drafted 53 pages protecting your assets. They were so thorough about shielding your partnership, your properties, your investments, that they barely glanced at what my attorneys added." Page 47, paragraph 12. She read the clause aloud, her voice clear and measured, each word falling into the silence like a stone into still water. "In the event that either party engages in public humiliation, degradation, or abuse of the other party, witnessed and documented by no fewer than 3 independent parties, all assets acquired during the marriage shall immediately revert to the injured party, along with any assets derived from the injured party's holdings." She closed the document. "Tonight, you called me not particularly bright in front of 300 witnesses and 6 news cameras. You told me the grown-ups are talking. You mocked me for not having a home you locked me out of. This is the second time you have humiliated me publicly. The morals clause has been triggered." She nodded to her father. Lord Edward produced a phone and made a single call. One word: execute. Haley looked back at Max. "As of this moment, my legal team has filed emergency countermotions. Let me tell you what has just changed." She counted on her fingers, calm, precise, each item stripped from Max's life like a layer of paint from a wall, revealing the bare, inadequate structure underneath. The penthouse, purchased with a loan secured against firm assets I own. Mine, your partnership, dependent on equity in a firm I own. Dissolved. Your Mercedes, your yacht in Marblehead, your cabin in Vermont, all financed through firm credit. Mine. Your custody petition, challenged by Eleanor Blackwell, who will present to the court tomorrow that the indigent, uneducated woman you described is the daughter of a British duke with more resources than you will earn in 100 lifetimes. Max's legs buckled. He sat down heavily on the stage steps, his body folding in on itself like a structure whose load-bearing walls have been removed simultaneously. His hands hung between his knees, empty. "And Max, the psychological evaluation you requested for me? My attorneys have filed a counterpetition for yours, because a man who failed to notice his wife was a Cambridge-educated attorney, his colleague was committing espionage, and his firm was owned by his father-in-law's family trust, all while living in the same house, might benefit from professional evaluation." The silence that followed was the loudest sound Haley had ever heard. 300 people, standing in a marble hall, champagne going flat in crystal glasses, canapes cooling on silver trays, a string quartet sitting with their bows in their laps because the music had stopped when the doors opened, and no one had told them to start again. Haley stepped away from the podium. She walked to the edge of the stage and looked down at Max, crumpled on the steps. His award lay on the floor beside him, its gold plating catching the chandelier light with cheerful indifference to the ruin surrounding it. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, not cruel, not gloating, not triumphant, almost sad. The sadness of a woman who had loved someone and discovered, through years of careful observation, that the person she loved did not exist. "You did not need to know I was a duke's daughter to treat me with respect, Max." One hand on her belly, the baby kicked, as if punctuating her mother's words. "You did not need to know about my education to stop mocking my intelligence. You did not need to know about my wealth to stop treating me like I was worthless. You did not need to know any of it. She straightened. The gray dress that Max had chosen to make her invisible now seemed irrelevant, overwhelmed by the bearing of the woman inside it. You just needed to ask me one question, any question, about who I was. In 3 years, you never asked. Not once. You decided I was simple, and that was enough for you. Max looked up at her. His face was wet. Tears streamed down cheeks that had been smiling at this crowd 20 minutes ago. His mouth formed words that did not arrive. I married you because I loved you, Haley continued. Not to test you, not to trap you. I loved you, and I wanted you to love me, the real me. Not my title, not my money, not my name. But you never tried to find the real me. You just wanted quiet. She turned to Vanessa. The woman stood between two protection officers, her emerald dress suddenly garish, her composure cracking like ice under weight. A single tear had escaped and was tracking down her cheek, cutting a line through her carefully applied makeup. And you? You looked at a pregnant woman and saw someone to step on. You built your career on cruelty and called it ambition. You confused ruthlessness with strength, and now you have lost everything, your license, your reputation, your freedom, because you could not imagine that the quiet woman you were mocking might be the most powerful person in the room. Vanessa's jaw tightened, her lips pressed together. She said nothing because there was nothing to say, and because, perhaps for the first time in her life, she understood that silence was not weakness, but was sometimes the only honest response available. Haley looked out at the crowd, 300 faces staring back at her, some with tears, some with shock, some with the uncomfortable recognition of people seeing themselves reflected in a mirror they had been avoiding. Margaret Wells stood near the champagne fountain, one hand pressed against her mouth, her eyes wide. She was remembering every event where she had ignored Haley, every cocktail party where she had continued her conversation without acknowledging the pregnant woman standing at the edge of her circle, every moment when a small act of kindness might have cost her nothing and meant everything. I want every woman in this room to hear me, Haley said. Your worth does not change because someone fails to see it. Silence is not weakness. Kindness is not stupidity. And the person you dismiss as insignificant might be the one who holds everything together. She let the words settle. She let the silence hold them. Then she turned to her father, standing at the foot of the stage. His eyes were bright. Not with tears exactly, with something larger than tears, with the fierce, uncomplicated pride of a father watching his daughter become the person he always knew she could be. I am ready to go home now, Papa. Lord Edward Weston Clark offered his arm. Haley descended the steps with the measured grace of someone who had been born to walk through grand halls, but had chosen, for 25 years, to walk through ordinary ones instead. She placed one hand on her father's sleeve and kept the other on her belly, and together they walked toward the doors. From the back of the room, a sound began, a single pair of hands clapping. Slow, deliberate, certain. Charles Finnegan stood in the doorway, uninvited, wearing a sport coat instead of a tuxedo. His security access revoked, but his curiosity very much intact. He had heard about the gala through contacts who still believed in him. He had come because some part of him had known that tonight would be different. He applauded. One person joined him. A woman near the middle of the room, someone Haley did not recognize, who began clapping with the careful determination of someone choosing a side. Then another person, and another. The sound built. It grew like a wave, gathering height and momentum, moving through the crowd until 300 people were on their feet, their champagne glasses abandoned on tables and trays, their hands making the only sound that mattered. Not the polite, obligatory applause of social events where clapping was a reflex rather than a choice. This was genuine. This was 300 people recognizing for the first time something extraordinary that had been standing in front of them all along. Haley did not look back. She walked through the open doors on her father's arm, her gray dress disappearing into the November night, and the doors closed behind the Weston Clark delegation with a soft, final click that ended one chapter and began another. Behind them, the gala continued in the way that social events continue after earthquakes, badly, and with a lot of confused standing around. Max remained on the stage steps. His hands hung empty at his sides. His award lay on the floor where it had fallen, and no one moved to pick it up. He stared at the closed doors with the expression of a man who has just realized that the building he thought he owned was actually rented, and the lease has expired, and the landlord has just walked away. Vanessa stood motionless between the protection officers, who maintained their positions with polite professionalism even after the Weston Clark party had departed. She would remain standing there for another 11 minutes before her legs would give out and she would sit very carefully on the nearest chair, her emerald dress pooling around her like water. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Did that really just happen?" Margaret Wells, who had ignored Haley at every social event for 3 years, answered in a voice that shook. She owned the whole firm, the whole time. Charles Finnegan, still applauding from the doorway, corrected her quietly. She owned everything. We were all just too blind to see it. 6 months later, the Weston Clark estate in the English countryside wore spring the way old houses wear it best. Slowly and beautifully, wisteria climbed the stone walls in purple cascades. The gardens, tended by the same family of groundskeepers for 3 generations, were exploding with tulips and daffodils and the aggressive optimism of English roses in April. Haley stood at a podium in the London School of Economics Grand Hall, presenting her framework for restructuring predatory corporate debt in developing nations to 200 delegates from 40 countries. She spoke in English, then switched to French for the African delegation, then to Spanish for the Latin American representatives. Her presentation was sharp, authoritative, and backed by a decade of data from the trust she had managed since she was 22. When she finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. Not the polite applause of a gala where people clapped because they were supposed to. The genuine applause of professionals recognizing work that would change lives. Afterward, she drove back to the estate. Her father was in the garden, sitting on a stone bench in the afternoon light, holding a baby girl, wrapped in a white blanket, Elizabeth Catherine Weston Clark. Named for her grandmother, the woman who had sacrificed everything to keep Haley safe. Born 3 weeks after the gala, healthy, strong, with her father's blue eyes and her mother's steady gaze. Edward looked up as Haley approached. The face that had commanded a room of 300 people, the face that had frozen Max Sutherland in place with aristocratic authority, softened completely. He was, in this garden, in this light, just a grandfather holding his grandchild. "She smiled at me," Edward said. "A real smile, not gas. A real one. She has you wrapped around her finger already. Completely, hopelessly, just like her mother." Haley took Elizabeth from her father's arms. The baby's eyes were bright, alert, curious, already watching the world with the focused attention of someone who intended to understand it. Haley held her close, feeling the small, warm weight of a life she had protected through the worst months of her own, and whispered the words she had been saving. You will never be invisible. You will never be small. And anyone who wants to love you will have to be curious enough to ask who you really are. The camera, if there had been one, would have pulled back to show 3 generations in a garden. A grandfather, a mother, a baby girl. 3 people who had been separated by oceans and danger and 25 years of hiding, finally together in the sunlight, finally home. Haley never remarried. She did not need to. She had her doctorship, her work, her family, and for the first time in her life, her own name spoken out loud with no one to hide from. In rural Montana, a small legal aid office operated out of a converted storefront on a main street that had more parking spaces than pedestrians. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The coffee maker produced something that was technically coffee, in the same way that a photograph of the ocean is technically water. The case files on the desk belonged to people society had largely decided not to think about. Domestic violence survivors, wrongful eviction cases, single mothers fighting for custody of children whose fathers had decided they were disposable. Max Sutherland worked here now, salary $43,000 a year. He drove a used Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. He rented a studio apartment above a hardware store where the heating was unreliable and the neighbors were loud, and the nearest restaurant was a diner that served acceptable pie and coffee that was slightly better than what the office produced. The penthouse, the Mercedes, the yacht, the Vermont cabin, the partnership, the reputation, the entire architecture of the life he had spent 35 years constructing, all of it transferred to the Weston Clark Trust the night of the gala. He had nothing except the clothes he had packed into 2 suitcases, which was, he sometimes reflected, exactly the same number of suitcases Haley had been standing with on the Back Bay sidewalk the night he locked her out. His colleagues in Montana described him as decent enough, keeps to himself, does solid work, good with the clients actually, especially the women, listens to them in a way that suggests he learned listening the hard way. On his desk, a framed photograph. Elizabeth Catherine Weston Clark, 2 days old, lying in a hospital bassinet with her eyes closed and her fists curled, and her whole future ahead of her. Haley had sent the photo with a handwritten note that Max kept in the desk's top drawer and read more often than he would admit. Her name is Elizabeth. She has your eyes. I have arranged supervised visitation once a month because every child deserves to know their father, even a flawed one. Do not make me regret this. He had a supervised visit last month, 30 minutes in a family services center in London, watched by a social worker who took notes on a clipboard. Elizabeth was 5 months old. She had learned to grab things with her fists, and when Max offered his index finger, she seized it with surprising strength and held on. When the visit ended and the social worker gently disengaged Elizabeth's grip, Max sat in a chair in the hallway for a long time, not crying. He had used up his tears in the 3 months after the gala, when the full weight of what he had lost had settled onto him like earth filling a grave. Now he was past tears. He was in the territory beyond them, the flat, quiet landscape where a person sits with their mistakes and understands, finally and completely, that some things cannot be unfixed. He finally understood what he had lost. Not the money, not the penthouse, not the career. He had lost the chance to be known by someone who would have let him know her if he had only asked. He never filed an appeal. He never contested the asset transfer. He signed every document Haley's attorneys sent without argument or negotiation. It was the first decent thing he had done in years, possibly the first decent thing he had done in his life. In Boston, the Massachusetts Bar Association's disciplinary hearing for Vanessa Lockhart lasted 2 days. The evidence was comprehensive. 13 documented contacts with Kellerman and Price, 17 compromised case files, 4 confirmed instances of leaked privileged strategy information, the security footage from the firm, the email records, the restaurant receipts. From her meetings with David Kellerman himself, Vanessa was disbarred unanimously. The FBI's investigation resulted in a plea deal, 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent federal record that would follow her to every job interview, every background check, every moment of the rest of her professional life. Kellerman and Price denied everything. They issued a statement expressing surprise and disappointment at Ms. Lockhart's actions, which were conducted without the knowledge or authorization of our firm. They claimed they had never promised her a partnership and had only taken her calls out of professional courtesy. They discarded her with the same efficiency that Vanessa had planned to use on Max, and with the same absence of guilt. Her last Instagram post, 6 months after the gala, was a photograph of moving boxes stacked in an empty apartment. No caption, no filter, no comments enabled. She took a job as a paralegal at a small firm in Connecticut. Entry-level work, the kind of work she had once mocked other women for doing. She was competent at it, though her supervisor noted that she was unusually quiet for someone with her background. She never contacted Haley. She sat at her kitchen table one evening and tried to write a letter. She spent 3 hours staring at a blank page, trying to find words that did not sound like excuses, or justifications, or the desperate self-serving apologies of someone who has been caught rather than someone who has truly changed. She could not find them. She threw the paper away. On the night of the gala, 300 people had watched her world end. She had spent 6 months understanding that she had built that world on other people's destruction. And destruction, she had learned, eventually always comes home. At Hale and Whitmore, Charles Finnegan was reinstated as managing partner within 30 days of the gala. He returned to the same office, the same desk, the same view of the Boston skyline, but the firm he came back to was not the firm he had left. Under his leadership, and with the backing of the Weston Clark Trust, the firm underwent a complete cultural restructuring, mandatory ethics training, transparent promotion processes, a zero-tolerance policy for workplace harassment, an anonymous reporting system that actually worked, staffed by an independent ombudsman who reported to the trust rather than the partners. On Charles's desk, a framed program from the London International Finance Summit, 5 years old. The keynote speaker was listed as H.V. Weston. Below it, in smaller print, the title of the presentation, Strategic Frameworks for Ethical Corporate Restructuring. When new law attorneys joined the firm and noticed the frame program, Charles would smile and tell them the same thing, a reminder. The most powerful person in any room might be the one nobody is paying attention to. Some of them understood what he meant. The best ones did. Haley's story teaches us something we already know but keep forgetting. Your worth does not change because someone refuses to see it. You do not become less intelligent because someone calls you simple. You do not become less powerful because someone treats you as powerless. You do not become less valuable because the person who should have valued you most chose to look away. Real love asks questions. It leans in. It wants to know. It says, "Tell me about your day," and means it. It says, "What are you thinking?" and waits for the answer. It says, "Who are you, really?" and is not afraid of what it might find. Max lost his wife, his daughter, his career, and his home. Not because Haley was royalty, not because she was rich. He lost everything because in 3 years of marriage, he never once asked his wife a single question about who she really was. That is not a story about money or power or secret identities. That is a story about what happens when you treat a person like they do not matter. Never underestimate quiet people. Silence can mask observation. Kindness can disguise strength. And the woman you called not particularly bright might be the one deciding your fate while you sleep. Haley's voice mattered all along. She simply waited until the right moment to use it. And when she did not whisper. She did not ask permission. She walked up to the microphone, took it from the hand of the man who had silenced her, and spoke clearly enough for 300 people and 6 news cameras and the entire world to hear. That is not revenge. That is justice. And justice, unlike revenge, builds something new from the wreckage of what was broken. What lesson hit home for you the most? Drop it in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that karma always keeps receipts, subscribe, because we have got more stories coming that will leave you speechless. Where are you watching from? Tell us below. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.